And we're back, part two. Yes, so getting back to the multi-ethnic cast, which I'm in love with. Our new Winifred is played by Whitney Peak. She's the contemporary version of her, whose character name is Becca. The new Sarah is Cassie, the character name, and played by Lilia Buckingham. I think that's her, Lilia. And our Mary would be, our character's name here is Izzy, and she is played by Belicia Escobedo. Love it, love her last name. And I'm loving the representation of a multi-ethnic cast, and her in particular. I knew her face looked familiar. I said, where have I seen her? She was in American Horror Stories last summer. So she's been booking gigs, and I'm not entirely sure how old she is. She does pass off relatively young. But the fact that she was, and I think I will link it too, because I think I reviewed it as well last summer. And she was part of, I think, the last 2 episodes of that particular set of episodes. It's not American Horror Story, it's Stories from the summer. And she participated in the, I think it was titled The Rubber Woman, episode Rubber Woman 1 and episode 2, Rubber Woman. So that, I thought there was some panache there with her as well. So she engages with these 2 other actresses perfectly. It's believable that they have been friends since forever, since they were young. There are elements, I will say, and I don't necessarily know if they were just, tipping their hat at like quintessential 1990s horror flicks, I guess you can say, that revolved around witchcraft. A lot of the vibes that I was getting from this particular sequel was very reminiscent of The Craft. So if you haven't watched that movie, I do recommend it. But there were certain elements that reminded me of that coven, and it was just a fun. Honestly, I mean, can I say that it near matches Hocus Pocus 1? No, I can't say that, because Hocus Pocus 1 was a different animal. It was a different timestamp. The directors were different. I believe the 1993 version was directed by Kenny Ortega, who, again, he had a lot of background actually in choreography, and I think provided a number of like dances that became very popular in movies like Hocus Pocus, but Newsies, The Cheetah Girls, High School Musical, I think, and I think a number of like Hugh films. Hold on a second. John Hughes films like Pretty in Pink and Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and Dirty Dancing, which I think I also reviewed for a Valentine's Day special. Again, I can link all these videos somewhere here or in the description box, but these were quintessential classic films. So he had like his own stamp on that particular film. He directed Hocus Pocus, the original, 1993, and I'm not saying that it really came from like a male's perspective, because I believe the director for this version, I think, let me catch her name, Anne Fletcher. And I'm not necessarily like comparing like between the sexes. I just think that they had their own sense of style that they're bringing to the film. I think the 1993 version had a much more edgier and the grainier appearance. I think also because they didn't have like necessarily that big budget that they probably were allotted this time around. And so even though there are tones to this particular 2022 version to kind of give it that very 1990s feel, it's very polished. And I think the 1993 version, not that it's like, outdated, but there were certain things, certain elements of it that I think that's why it cultivated and became the cult classic that it was. It took time to grow. It's very much in that category of like Rocky Horror Picture Show. When it first made its debut, it wasn't like breaking box offices, but or breaking the box office, but with time and with every passing year and season, it became like a staple for a lot of people. I'll admit I wasn't really privy to it, but I want to say that it was like really bold. I think also because of the connotation that, again, PG is the PG rating for the 90s is nothing in comparison to now, which now it's like very watered down, very child specific. But in 93 you got away with a lot more stuff, for heaven's sake. And if you're not privy to the background of Hocus Pocus, it is based on, loosely based. I'm not saying it's a direct, but they wanted to make it a point that this did occur in certain characters' names, like Sarah, were actual names of victims that were persecuted during the witch trials in Salem. And this is where our movie also takes place, in Salem. They actually shot in Salem in the 1993 version. The 2022, from what I'm hearing, they shot in Rhode Island for some reason. I don't know why they just didn't go back to where they shot originally, but nonetheless. So here's a little bit of, and I'll also link down this information down below. So like the creator for Hocus Pocus, David Christner said that the idea of the movie evolved from him telling scary bedtime stories to his children. Specifically, Christner told Yahoo back in 2015, "Halloween is a huge deal in our home, and it has been since our daughters were little. Furthermore, the writers have gone on record to say that they loosely base the three sisters of the heart of Hocus Pocus on the very real victims of the Salem witch trials." For those wondering what the Salem witch trials were, well, back in 1692 in the puritanical Massachusetts, there was a series of arrests and persecutions trying to figure out whether a group around 200 people were witches or not. The hearings simultaneously led to 19 innocent people being hung, 5 being imprisoned, and 1 man being crushed to death. And I think one of them that like really went on to be documented and having their traumatic life recorded through like, processes of like everything went before anything was any kind of form of formal record keeping. Everything went through a church. So that's why that information is still available and still preserved by some miracle. And if you do visit Salem, this part of Massachusetts, I believe there's like museums dedicated to them. And that one particular one that went through like the worst, or it was documented, was an individual called Sarah. There's a whole museum, and I found, again, you go down like a rabbit hole once you start watching or start doing your research. And I think the culprit for this particular person, I think his name was, hold on a second, Reverend Samuel Parris, which again, I want to say that's kind of where we are led to in the beginning of the film, a reverend persecuting Wendy and her sisters, because again, that's what you were to do. You were to become married. But there's a whole like checkered thing when it comes, there's a bit of like bigotry and racism when it comes to this particular real life circumstance with Reverend Samuel Parris, and I will also link that down in the description box. And it involved a Native American. Now, for this very kid friendly, they weren't going to go into those specifics, but just know that Sarah's character was based, I think, loosely based on this particular person that was hung. And when we see 1993's version, all 3 of them are hung, which today would be unheard of to see anything like that in a in a contemporary film like Hocus Pocus 2. But there was these tongue-in-cheek jokes and innuendos about sex, and again, like, it felt very biblical at times, and they were just kind of poking fun at it. even down to the fact that whoever lit the candle needed to be inexperienced and a virginal character, which, you know, they make references to for this 2022 version, but they don't go into specifics like maybe the 1993 film would have. Um, and there's also a lot of like flirting from Sarah's character. Um, and not for nothing too, I had no clue. I looked at I saw Hocus Pocus like briefly when I did like my spooktacular last year, but I did not know that Doug Jones is the one that plays uh, Wendy's love interest, which technically wasn't. They had a small kiss, and that's very made, spoiler alert, that's made very clear in this film, because in the 1993 version you didn't get that. You were led to believe that they actually had a romance, but he had a romance more with Sarah's character than he did necessarily Winifred. But yes, he played Billy Butcherson. That was her lover, and she also, you know, because she became extremely jealous that he got with her sister, she basically killed him and buried him, and so made sure that he would never speak about the truths, and sewed his mouth shut for centuries. But the thing is, and then again, this is why I said the CGI in comparison, the CGI was rather rudimentary, if you can say, for the 1993 version. And so a lot of the stuff that you're seeing, it wasn't, they were trying it with the cats, but they used cats, they used actual cats to get certain shots. It wasn't just like this animated CGI creation. It was, they were using actual animals for a particular scene. And in Billy's case, when he is dug up, because he is our zombie, there's a moment where he wants to be let it be known that he does not foster any great feelings for, Winifred. So he breaks apart his sewn lips, and out comes dust and moths, which Doug Jones is our actor, incredible actor. He's gone on to do a number of films. He admits that he had to actually, because that wasn't something that you can edit later. So you're actually seeing dust and moths crawl out of his mouth, which makes it made it probably incredibly uncomfortable, but perfect for the scene. So, and he explained how like that went down, that he had to actually have like a dental dam inside his mouth. That today, and that's what you see often in this 2022 version, you see a lot of CGI. So I think the element that captivated an audience in 93, I think loses something for this updated version, because it just was a little more grounded in like some form of reality, even down to the flying. There's videos of behind the scenes footage of Bette Midler, who I love, Bette Midler, and Sarah Jessica Parker, and Kathy Najimy. I couldn't pronounce her name last time. I kept forgetting. I know I've seen her in a number of films. Like, for heaven's sake, I remember her from Soap Dish. But I couldn't remember her name. She's one of those actresses that you've seen them in a million things, like shows and movies, but you don't remember their damn name. And I'm sorry, she's a remarkable actress. She was even on RuPaul's Drag Race in one of the seasons. But so she plays Mary. But there's behind the scene footage of them actually being on harnesses to do the whole like mimicking the whole like broom ride thing or whatever. And they spoke to like specialists, right? Our little broom here. They spoke to specialists that needed to kind of have a sense of how they would if they were genuinely these witches, how they would ride their broomsticks. And so they did some like testing with them, like how they drove, and based on how they would drive, that's how they would ride their brooms. But again, also I want to make a note that this 2022 version stayed true to the 1993, but they updated it a little bit. Winifred keeps her broom. Sarah's character of Sarah, in the 93 version, she has a mop, and then now she has like a Swiffer. And then Mary, as opposed to the vacuum cleaner, now she has like these little Roombas or something. The ones that, those little robots that pick up the dust and stuff. Very cute. Very updated, but very CGI. They're no longer on harnesses. Now they just kind of do the whole green screen thing and they do it in post. So again, not to like deflate people from watching it, I think it was fun. The addition of also our museum director here, who is giving the whole backstory to the Sanderson sisters, here played by Sam Richardson. His character name is Gilbert. He was hysterical. And even though he was supposed to be like our villain, because he tricks the girls into lighting this candle that he kind of self-made, and even that I thought was really cute, really kitschy and fun and funny, because it just did not look like a nice candle. It looked all wobbly and clumsy, but he has some really great one-liners that made him really stand out. Like, you wanted to hate him because it's like, why would you do that? But the whole backstory of why is the curious part here. Like, there's moments where he admits to being a kid in '93, and that he was on his way home from trick-or-treating and happened to see the Sanderson sisters in the middle of flying. So while, you know, you are led to believe that, you know, he was in pursuit of them, he was already seeing the tail end of what was happening between their grasping of trying to stay alive, and then Binks and Max and his sister and his love interest, who we suspect was like I think she was a natural witch, and very much like Becca's character, she was a natural witch. So that's why they gravitated to the salt, and they were so protected by the salt. So Gilbert's character, being a kid, trick-or-treating, and I think he actually, if anything, they stole his candy and he was picked on a lot, became fascinated by them, and then decided that he would guard the book. And there is even hints, again, like I said, there were hints to the craft. There were hints of what is it, Silence of the Lambs, you know. So because the way that they strap the book so that it won't leave, very reminiscent of kind of that jacket that has all the straps, and even the portion of the eye, so the eye does not loom out, has like these little cage things. It's very, very reminiscent of Silence of the Lambs. Anthony Hopkins, if you haven't seen that film, do watch it. It really is it really is a Halloween movie, regardless of how you see it. So it was fun, and we have some backstory also when it comes to the sisters of the young lady who plays her too. The young lady, Taylor Henderson, who plays the young Winifred. She got Bet's mannerisms down. And I want to say this to like true, like, you know, 80s and 90s film buff fans. If you remember all those great movies that Bette Midler was in, like films like Big Business, Ruthless People, Beaches, Hocus Pocus for sure, the First Wives Clubs, those are like the bigger hits. And she has these mannerisms that she's never, I mean, that's just her quirks as a human being, but she's known for them. At least I've clocked them over the years. And that this child was able to get those mannerisms down very,